Heard that lady.
Got it.
That lady's weird. I'm a little scared of that lady.
The Zoom lady? Recording in progress. It seems more intense than like when you're on like an actual movie set and they're like 3, 2, 1, camera action. It's like recording in progress. It feels very like big Zoom is watching you. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm scared. I'm a little scared, Zoom. But it's okay because now people who didn't know they were being recorded, they know for sure now because the lady will tell your ass.
Recording in progress.
Hi, thanks for joining us on Reflect, Recalibrate. Woo woo. We're so happy you're here. Remember to tell your friends, your family, and your foes, yes, your foes, that they too can learn about artivists and artivism by subscribing to RFC anywhere they listen to podcasts. They can also watch and subscribe on YouTube at Reflect Calibrate the Podcast. Well, I think that's that. Now let's get into it.
All right, welcome to Reflect, Recalibrate. Woo-hoo! I'm Danny Carter, and
I'm Janet.
one day we'll do this with real people. It'll be very exciting. I won't just press a button for the applause. How you doing, Janet?
Oh, I am well.
Well,
You know, just enjoying the summer and preparing for everything that will come in the fall and everyone. So I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well. It is also sunny here. I'm in San Diego today. So we have East Coast and West Coast represented today.
But we're in cohesion because we're wearing the same colors.
I noticed we did that again. And I feel like I'm cheating. I'm wearing like almost the exact same thing I wore for podcast episode 1. So people are going to start thinking like, I don't have many clothes, which is kind of true right now because I'm moving from like Mexico to California to who knows where next. What do your earrings say?
They say slum beautiful.
Oh.
And it's a quote from a song. And if you want to learn more about it, these earrings are bought by, created by Offbeat Diva, designer Denisha Briscoe, designer artist. So, you know, yep, that info's down there. But yeah, slum beautiful, life is so amazing. I might be singing that wrong, but yes, it's a quote from a song.
At least we got you to sing at one point on the podcast episode today. What are we doing today? Do you know, Janet?
Yes, I do know what we're doing. But before we bring our fabulous guests on, wasn't there something you wanted to talk about, Daniel?
Yeah, there was something I think we need to clarify. I've been including the hashtag intersectional feminist on many of our posts, but I realized you and I never really had to talk about what that means. And then I realized maybe I was using this hashtag in a bit of an assuming way. So I was like, maybe we should talk a little bit about what that means. And this is a term, I don't know if I want to call it a buzz term, but it is a term that I'm seeing more and more frequently in protests, like on protest signs, particularly with women's marches. And I'm seeing it a little bit more in news. And here in California, now that I just moved here, I've been noticing even t-shirts that say intersectional feminist on it, which I found interesting. Yeah. So I was like, oh, this is now becoming like kind of like a brand in a way too. So I was going to ask you first, one, do you think of yourself as a feminist? Because that's step one.
You know what? It is a good question because I don't think I've necessarily called myself a feminist, but people that I've been around who know me and know my work and just understand, you know, my ideologies and etc. call me a feminist, you know, but I haven't ever called myself a feminist. Now with the word intersectional is definitely a buzzword. And when I put both of them together, I have an understanding, you know, well, intersectional, you know, refers to isms and such as like, well not even isms, but race, culture, politics, economics, and how all of these things intersect, how they all overlap. I think of a Venn diagram. when I think of that. So I might not have ever called myself a feminist. However, all of what I do is within feminism, most likely. But yeah, that would be my answer. I haven't ever called myself a feminist, but I have an understanding of what it is.
Yeah. There's this great article. It's there's a transcript and there's also the actual interview recording on NPR with an author named Caitlin Moran. I think it's Moran. And she wrote this book called How to Be a Woman. And I'll be honest, I didn't read the book and I need to read this book because the interview, this was many, many years ago and it stuck with me so much because she said something I thought was very hilarious. And this was at a time where I was also unsure of like, am I a feminist? Am I not a feminist? But she basically said, do you like to be in charge of your vagina? Do you like to be in control of your pussy? If the answer is yes, then you're a feminist. So I really liked the sound of this woman. I need to check out this book still. I'm not a very good feminist. And I didn't study feminism specifically. And I even went to like a arts and culture program. And I still didn't really go that deep into feminism because I always kind of assumed I understood what feminism meant and that I was a feminist. But the more I learn about intersectional feminism, the more I'm like, wow, I there's a lot I don't know and I want to learn more about it. And I'm a little embarrassed that I don't know more about it. But like from what I understand of it, it's this idea of overlapping oppressions and that it's really easy for us to say this is a gender issue, this is a socio-economic issue, this is a political issue, but to understand how all these different oppressions intersect and understanding and valuing the differences. There were a lot of white female feminists in the like 80s in particular, but even beforehand, who were pushing an agenda and not realizing that a lot of their beliefs and values did not work the same way for women of other cultures and backgrounds. And so that's where this term came from. So yeah, so for me, I really like it because it sounds complicated. And I like the idea of like, let's not box things so simply and categorize things in such a quote unquote easy way. Let's complicate things. Let's realize the intricacies in what we're doing. So I'm very drawn to it. And I still feel like maybe I should learn more about it before I just start using the hashtag. But yes, that
good. I feel like that's a good acknowledgement of your evolving the evolution of your understanding, and truly that's how we educate ourselves. You know, we start to understand, okay, why am I doing this? why am I using these terms that I might not have a complete understanding of? But you know, in talking about this briefly, because this is a whole conversation in itself that, you know, we can explore again. I think it's a great topic to explore. I actually did purchase a book called Black Feminist Thought by Patricia Collins, because, you know, I'm just interested in different ways of thinking and also interested in ways of thinking pertaining to people who look like me, and the experiences that we've gone through. And as you said, one thing that I am aware of, feminism was very much white women creating an agenda that was for them in particular, that would help them in particular, not recognizing that what would help them did not help everybody else. So then coming to this term of intersectionality that we are now using in so many ways makes it, I think, it gives better understanding to how, you know, all of these things work together in our societies and adversely affect us, you know, in the bigger picture. So yeah, I mean, thanks for asking that question. This is a good starting point. We can revisit this, I think, again.
Yeah, and I think we'll probably even touch a little bit on it maybe with our guest, because I think there's a lot at the intersection of feminism and queer studies. And so maybe we should go ahead and introduce our guest.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Woo-hoo! So today our guest is Joseph Amodei. Welcome, Joseph. Joseph and I don't want to say we go way back, but we go back a little bit. And Joseph who goes by they, them, is a new media artist, theater designer, educator, and activist. Joseph conceives of art as a powerful epistemic and emotional tool for examining assumed realities. Their work combines innovative technology, extensive research, and hope for alternate futures to invite audiences into communal processes of debriefing and relearning. How intriguing. So this is Joseph. Welcome.
Hi, everyone.
How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good.
You know what? I just thought about something because of the term assumed realities. I was thinking about this years ago and trying to figure out how to always do this. But recently, someone in one of my cohorts brought it up, but describing what we have on, because we can't, well, and I don't know if this is what Joseph means by assumed reality, but it just made me think about it. I can't assume that everybody knows what we're wearing when they're watching, or you know what I mean, because of impaired vision, or things of that nature, just the inclusivity of what we do. So earlier we were talking about what we have on. So I'm asking if all of us can just describe what we look like, what we have on, and what's in our background, to try to start practicing that, if everyone doesn't mind.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
Okay.
Who should go first, Janet? You or Joseph?
I'll go first.
Okay, great.
So I have on a golden yellow tank top. I'm wearing large earrings of cloth that say "Slum Beautiful." I have on green square glasses. I am a dark-skinned woman with a short afro, and I'm sitting in front of a bookcase of vinyl records.
Which I think is really cool, actually. I really like your background. Joseph, would you like to go next?
Yeah. Okay. What do I look like? I hate thinking about it. No, it's okay. I am a non-binary white person with sort of like dirty blonde hair at the moment. It's short. I just got a haircut. I've got an eyebrow piercing. I've got a mustache and like longer beard than I usually like feel comfortable wearing these days, but it's fine today. And then I've got a print shirt with black and red sort of little brush strokes, but it also reminds me of old licorice candy for some reason, and I like that. And then I've got a necklace that's got just a blank silver bar on it. And I'm in, I live in Pittsburgh, but I'm in Allentown, surrounded by, I shouldn't show, that's not my, surrounded by boxes as I'm helping my partner move into their new place here. So
great.
What about you, Danny?
Yeah, this is a very good opportunity to practice positive self-talk of how can I positively describe myself here. I am also wearing a yellow gold t-shirt that I wore in episode 1. My Rosie the Riveter red bandana that I love to wear. I have red hoop earrings. I have white skin, and I have a little bit of eye makeup on just for our audience today. And behind me, I have some images, some different graphic art pieces, and a poem that are all relating to our theme of our podcast, artivism, artistic activism. And I have a few plants, one that's super fake and one that's very real. So just to balance it out, that's where I am.
Thank you, everyone, for participating in that.
That was a great idea, Janet. We should do that more often. Thank you for pointing that out. And I always appreciate too when people leave comments in our podcast, suggestions and comments. We love that. Thank you.
Yes. So, Joseph, now you're on the hot seat.
Tight. Okay.
Let's get started. Danny, do you mind if I ask this question first? I think it'll be not only to bring in this wonderful guest of ours, but to inform our listeners and people who are watching. Joseph, what is a new media artist?
Good question. So a new media artist is like, I think it's a very broad term that I use on purpose, but and because a lot of people interpret it to mean a lot of different things. But but I, and I always sort of like think about what, like I always shift around what sort of like terms to like classify my parts of my practice in. But anyways, because it's always new media artists is like think of it as like using technology, particularly newer technology in some form as the medium. And like that, I think is not only like whatever's at the forefront of possibility being developed, but also like new combinations of older and newer technology to make new situations. For me, that involves a lot of video and projection design and augmented and virtual reality, but also like, a well-placed QR code or like collecting, like visualizing data in an interesting way, or an installation or a performance or a new way of knocking on doors. I don't know.
Yeah. Can I ask another question relating to that? I've been learning more about immersive media. It's very exciting what's happening and predicting how we will, like what the cinematic world will be like in a few years. Like I'm wondering, like, are we going to have theaters with virtual reality goggles, or is everyone just going to be at home with virtual reality goggles? What that's going to be like. But I'm wondering for you, Joseph, as far as this new technology, what are you excited about in the realm of artistic activism, of what could be really beneficial? What isn't maybe an area that you really want to explore?
An area that I'm interested in exploring is so yeah, immersive media. I think all of this augmented reality, think like images being overlaid of a camera, like Pokemon Go or something, or like a Snapchat face filter, and then like virtual reality, like you're in like a 360 video world. What I am interested in doing is thinking about like what's becoming possible. Technology is like really cool. Some like face, like, you can learn like some ways in which you can like do stuff in real time that would have been like impossible. Think about like generating environments in real time while you're performing in some sort of video. That stuff's super interesting, but I'm always thinking about like this type of technology and its relationship to access and who can look at those things. Because that's a big problem with in technology in general. So I guess I'm interested in like ways that they can be like sort of cheaply proliferated. And that is like, they're like cell phone access, still a big problem, but more and more people have a phone that's surprisingly more powerful than they might realize in their pockets. So I'm interested in things like browser-based virtual reality, where you can like create an experience that can be viewed if you happen to have like a virtual reality headset or access to one at a mall or something, you can like use it. But also like if you don't, it actually can run in your browser on your cell phone or any computer you can get. And sort of like thinking about how to make like lightweight augmented reality apps that like overlay useful information, or like create face filters to support, like, as a fun way to support whatever campaign you're working on or something. Or like being able to add like a digital layer to like important sites that you're trying to like activate or something. People are doing really cool things with that, and that can happen on most devices now. So I'm excited about its wider proliferation.
You are a professor, correct?
It's true. Yeah.
That information regarding access and how to create from that which you may not have, how do you, I don't know, what your students actually have access to, but how do you go about helping your students understand that way of creation? Just because you don't have this particular device or technology doesn't mean you aren't able to create A, B, or C. Or how do you talk to them about maximizing the use of, like you said, this powerful tool, this cell phone that they might have?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I try to like communicate that there's like, no matter what things you have, what level of things you have access to, there's always like interesting things to be done with it, and to sort of think about what that medium of what you're like really trying to work with. Because having a super large budget and like making something super like high end graphically can be really cool, don't get me wrong, but like doesn't necessarily make something interesting or meaningful. And it takes a lot of time to make some like a really complex high-end VR video game would take a really long time, big team of people to make. And if it's like not interesting or like not like, I don't know, what, like it's not always about jumping to the resources, like thinking about what you're doing and why you're doing it is much more important. And then also like, it does still require a computer at these points, but I guess like, I just try to encourage people to, and also when they're designing things, like the people making these things, like the students, we like they get a computer that we've spec'd out for them when they join the university, like, so they don't have to like know, like, so they have something that they can work in the way we want. But when you make things, not everybody will have that computer. So we talk about like how to make things. You can like measure what devices you're making. So you can like be like, okay, cool, like this runs really well on my computer, but will it run really well on someone's phone? And you can like test for that. And we have different devices lying around for people to like test those types of things. You can test it. Yeah.
That the school provides the actual technology.
Yeah, I mean, like students pay for it as part of their fees, but they don't have to figure out like what type of computer they need for our classes when they show up. We had like a big grant, so we would give headsets to like VR headsets to all of our students when they join.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
They can make something on it, and have a device to even like play stuff at their own, like in their own house. Especially last year was super important because we normally have a lab of things for people to try all sorts of things, and we get all sorts of weird things that like no one will ever use in a year or two, and like because we like for people to like get a chance to like mess around and make something with it, and like maybe there's something new form that can, or new like way of interacting with this that can come out of like a some sort of a like hologram picture frame or something.
Okay. I need to go ahead and be a student at your university.
Yeah. I was about to say, Jana, I can see you taking notes because you're about to be a professor.
Oh man, yeah, that's a whole nother situation. However, if I could be a student and just get some virtual reality tools, like,
I was wondering, one thing I really love about your work, Joseph, I hadn't thought about this before until you started talking about your work as a teacher, as a professor, but there's a lot of interaction, a lot of interactivity in your work, which is very appealing to me, especially in my background with theater and with music, of like interacting with spectators in person. And I was wondering, when you were talking about how you're using the technology, like what is the objective, and that being the most important part, right? And then how you use interaction like as a tactic, both like within your work as well as how you're teaching your students that. Can you just expound a little bit on that?
Yeah, I mean, on days when I'm feeling really good about the possibilities of technology, and the ways in which it like can create like really engaging and sort of combinations of forms that create these feelings of new forms that make people really remember and deeply want to go further into stuff. When I'm thinking that and not like exhausted by the amount of advertisements I have to look at and the sort of like, terrible late capitalist ramifications of technology, like working with technology. When I'm like feeling good about stuff, like, I don't know, I think like a lot of the ways in which one interacts with the world these days are very much like sort of like game-like and like, we're interacting with things all the time, and sort of like to create experiences that sort of like play into that sort of like way in which we are always interacting with the world. We do things, like I'm picking up this sparkling water and like bringing it to my mouth, drinking it and putting it down on this little like nice setup I've got so that it looks like well lit and whatever, and hopefully you can hear me and stuff. Like thinking about that into like and like how to like think about all the like processes that go into that, and like into a simple interaction like that, and like how you can like create a space where you like make something for people to like have the like free range to make their own sort of choices, but like in a world that makes sense to the ideas you want people to engage with. Like Packing Cracking is this like interactive like game sort of performance about gerrymandering. And gerrymandering is like the pervasive practice of politicians choosing their voters rather than the other way around. And it's very much a sort of like is a game in and of itself, but it like where they're like drawing maps to have predetermined outcomes instead of voters being able to choose it. But it's like, it's a pretty like meta political issue. It like happens, it used to happen a lot behind the scenes, and it's like not as like always at the forefront of what people think about, like when you think about what issues you care about most. So the sort of like mechanical issues are not always people's things, but they, if there's something you really care about, it's definitely being impacted by those mechanics. um I as like find it super interesting, but like that's fine, like, but I want other people to sort of like understand how this like connects the things that they care about and how it makes up the realities they live in, and give them the tools to like be like, oh well, that could help affect this thing. And so like how to take something that can be a potentially dry topic and make it interesting is like by making it like a by making it a performance where you're not like watching something, you're not watching a piece of art, you're like interacting with it. It's like where you could that way like you could like use it as like a way of learning about the people you're playing these games with. Like you have a team, you care about them, and then like you like end up teaching each other, and you like have to learn things and then share them, and it sort of like creates a situation where you're really like sort of being a very active in your own learning, uh, much like how I like to teach, but this is like sort of for fun, and then so it becomes like a very like fun experience where you're like doing things, and then like this that act of like the act of like being involved in your learning helps make you sort of like pay attention and draw these connections in way like hopefully does this right, like in ways that help you sort of understand how like in this case gerrymandering connects to like your life, how it fits in with your life and experience. And the same thing with the classroom. Like if I'm teaching someone how to like make a 3D environment, like how do they like connect that to a place of creation for things that they care about and are interested in.
So I I love the idea of participatory art, because as you said, it helps people engage and have a better understanding when you're applying yourself to whatever activity it is that's going on within the art space. I find it interesting to think of it as fun, especially when we're talking about gerrymandering. And I think about the people who come in and the photos that I saw on your website. Um, I don't know where these people are from. I don't know their socioeconomic backgrounds whatsoever. I have no idea. But I'm wondering, they come in, they have this experience. And one part of what you mentioned, I believe, was that community members within those different communities share their stories, I believe, about their experience within their community in terms of the gerrymandering and how it's adversely impacting them in their community. I'm wondering about the participants, and how do you measure, or do you follow up with the people thereafter to see, if they actually, like we said, we hope that this plants a seed and then they do something about it. But how do you, or do you have a system of follow up? Because for me, if something is not directly affecting me, I might not, necessarily look into it on a regular basis, even though the kind of person I am, I'm just like, okay, I'm thinking about it. But if I'm living in a neighborhood where gerrymandering really isn't impacting me, I don't know how much I'm going to do after I have this fun experience of participating in this art that I went into in this gallery space or wherever it might be. So how do you track that? And if you don't, how do you reconcile the idea of fun pertaining to something that is so serious as gerrymandering is?
um so tracking it can be a little difficult, but it's but we try to like provide resources for different levels of engagement is something that I think about. So like, yeah, like making people aware of this, like gerrymandering and some of its intricacies. And we make it like made multiple versions of this. So it's like, it's like for the people of Pennsylvania, for the people of North Carolina, different things are happening, different versions are made. And then same like whether like we did it like before the census and we would talk about how much the census is connected to that, or like after the census. And so we talk about what's happening to that date. Like it's always sort of like adjusted to sort of what's going on in the moment, but it's But no, it's a hard thing to keep track of. And it's something I'm interested in figuring out how to better keep track of it. And also sort of thinking about why. So I'm keeping track of it. So it's like at the end of this performance, we give people, especially when it was like most recently online, we would like link people to a page of like things you can do with 1 minute, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, or more than an hour, and like all the things that we talked about and all the people you saw, we would like interview all the people that have been interviewed that you see. If something stuck out to you and you remembered it, the ability to like go further, is there. If you were like, oh, whatever Fair Districts PA is doing seems really cool. What are they doing right there? Or if you're like, oh, and part of it's like showing people maps in a place that they care about. Like we had this game where you like put in like a zip code that you care about, and it'll show you your maps and ask you to sort of not only at that point like be like, does this look fair to you, but like think about these lines and look at it where they're cutting, and at a certain point, like it can be hard to tell, or it could be like actually only if you're like really actually local would like when I looked at the ones in North Carolina where I grew up and I like zoomed in, I'd be like, oh, like I can see where they split the city here, and it's like oh, like seems weird, doesn't seem like an accident they would like, split Durham in two, or like zip around this suburb here and include it over here, things that like people might know, but like, from actually being part of it and seeing like, and we'd also go to some actual lines and show people the lines. And then like, you walk, at one point we were like walking down the street. I was like in Asheville, and it's like, it's like a little side downtown street, not in the main downtown, but in West Asheville. And it's like, you wouldn't know that there's this giant invisible line that's splitting this, like basically like, like little shops and restaurants and like buildings. It just splits this like sort of little main street of this neighborhood right in two. And you wouldn't know because these lines are invisible, but it's like clearly like this is one community, but it's been like split in half for some reason. What is that reason? But I don't know. It's hard, to make changes and hard to make people care about these things. And like, I also feel like some of the work that's important isn't really as measurable, in a way. Like, yeah, like we can track how many people like click on our post-show email that has a bunch of links to a certain extent, but it's harder to track like if people like remember it a year later when they're trying to like do some other type of like judicial gerrymandering in Pennsylvania, after it's hard to know. I hope so. But I haven't fully, I would say I'm always looking for ways to like track it and also like track the sort of like non-analytic data,
Yeah.
Yeah.
We make maps
qualitative.
The qualitative or like the experiential. And so like, like one time, what we used to do during quarantine would ask people to people would make these personal maps. This is not that, but they would make a personal map. And then like one of the last acts, we would have people like pin it up as a way to remind them about what they learned somewhere, And so like help people create a moment in their own space for a place to remember,
Yeah. Keep that visual reminder.
Yeah. But definitely like, providing people with resources and like helping people like imagine different ways things could be. There's this game theorist I really like. Her name is Mary Flanagan. She has this idea about critical play, which informs a lot of my work. And critical play is this idea that gameplay and game spaces are a chance to sort of like rehearse new social and political reformulations of the world. And I really like that, and sort of like really try to make that come alive and figure out like also like play test and that idea in a lot of my work.
We're talking a lot about objectives and tactics and measurement. And of course, all these words to me are making me think of the Center for Artistic Activism, because that is how Joseph and I met, through the Free the Vaccine campaign, co-led by the Center for Artistic Activism, C4AA, and Universities Allied for Essential Medicine, so UAEM. And I would love to hear, Joseph, about maybe some of the things we've talked about, like interaction, for example, and even like not virtual reality. What's the other one? The
augmented reality.
Augmented reality. There it is. So,
yeah,
because we had some really cool augmented reality projects with Free the Vaccine too. And so maybe hearing more about your work with that, and maybe even you could speak generally too on your role in C4AA, what you've learned from it, maybe what you're taking from that organization, applying to your teaching and to your work. Maybe let's work backwards. Like, you just did an exhibit, which is very exciting. Let's start with that.
Yeah, so all of the work that activists around the world have been doing with Free the Vaccine, as in trying to like free and continuing still to try and sort of free the patents and also the technology, and like encourage its not only like sort of like removing the legal protections of it, but encouraging its direct transfer and sharing of production processes to make the vaccine widely accessible and sort of like be able to actually have a shot at putting this COVID-19 pandemic behind us, even more so now with all these variants roaring up and like it's the sort of unmitigated spread all over the world in countries that are not able to get access to vaccines, just makes it all that much worse. So one way to deal to sort of honor all of this labor and artistic activism and sort of like document it is like working with Laura Holzmann from Free the Vaccine, who's the curator of this exhibit at Chatham University, which is where I teach in the immersive media department. In partnership with the visual art department, we put up an exhibit that sort of like looks at selections from all this work. And their Creativity versus COVID, Ending the Pandemic for Good is the name of the exhibit. And there is a link in the transcript to the digital version of the exhibit. And then so Laura and I and my collaborator for Free the Vaccine, Kisha Patterson, we sort of like designed this exhibit together and to highlight different things. So we had one wall that was just like a ton of, it was sort of like to like make it sort of look like a protest or an action. So we just filled the wall with all sorts of posters and photos and sort of like banners and other paraphernalia collected. We had a wall that sort of talks about like what happened, what it looks like to win and to like sort of affect the media narrative, that had pictures and some actual paraphernalia from some actions and sort of how they showed up in news coverage next to each other with some explainers about that. Some interviews of the actual artistic activists themselves, sort of in a 3D VR space. And then also some of those sort of Pittsburgh actions that Kisha and I have been doing, you know, some like maybe trying to figure out what to do with all this energy and move it towards like broader like health equity concerns. And some piece in that exhibit, one of the things I did pretty early in the Free the Vaccine, especially in earlier in the pandemic when, and at the time I ended up like, I was rehearsing a play right before the world shut down. So I ended up being somewhat sort of like unexpectedly in Brooklyn for the first 3 or 4 months of the pandemic. So it was very scary. So I really wasn't like going outside like at all at the time. And I was like, well, what can I do? Like, you know, in those early months before, like, you know, if you can't really go out, if you can't like engage with space in the way that I normally had known, that was a key component of a lot of this type of organizing work. So one thing I did was make a Snapchat filter, and I should have had it prepped. They actually removed it from the Snapchat store, but anyways, you can like yeah. So this filter was like a picture of the Free the Vaccine logo, which is, I'll describe it as this very colorful bird gripping a vaccine and flying. It says Free the Vaccine. It's probably behind you on Danny, or like the color. The color scheme is there. It's those color schemes.
Really, it's too small, but don't worry, we'll edit it in.
That's awesome. Anyways, so I made this little headband of this little bird that would like follow your face around, and you can hook it up to your Zoom calls. So I would just start wearing it in all of my Zoom calls.
Love it.
And then people would be like, "What's that?" And I'd be like, "Oh, it's this Free the Vaccine," you know. And then I would have a conversation about the work I was doing with Free the Vaccine and why I was wearing this. And so I wear it all in my meetings and classes and couple of interviews, so like job interviews. So you know, it was fun, and it was like you know, one thing I like about sort of new media spaces is it can be like a lot of people use Snapchat all the time, but a lot of people who are maybe not as like as comfortable with technology in their everyday lives in that sort of way. Like what this type of like new media stuff can be, I think, really joyful when people experience it for the first time. It's like magical feeling, you know? So I think like getting to like show some fun face filters, people really like, who had not experienced that before, it really was like one, what are you doing? Two, like, wow, that's possible. That's exciting. And then then like that moment of joy to be connected to like, I really like working at the edge of technology, because I think like if you can use that sort of like edge of joy that's really possible when people experiencing this for the first time, before they become codified into like an Instagram filter or something, before they become trying to be sold to us in a way that's about like monetizing and collecting our data.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
The technology, that joy.
Yeah. In your journey with Free the Vaccine, is there anything in particular that you really learned and discovered, something that you've started implementing into your work, or maybe with your work? For example, for me joining Free the Vaccine, I had not worked in access to medicine, but I did work in prison abolition, and I was starting to draw a lot of connections between these two arenas of activism. So I'm wondering whether it has to do with like format, or whether it has to do with like the history of access to medicine. Was there anything in particular that you're now implementing into your work, and that maybe, do you have any future projects coming up?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that for sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, being part of Free the Vaccine really solidified this direction that I was moving in, of blending like technology, creativity, and activism together. It was just like very much like, yeah, this is what I wanted. And specifically for me, also access to medicine was not really something that I had been directly part of, but now probably will be forever. So like I mentioned, like, and also like I learned a lot about like a lot of different like ways for like coming up with a very concrete plan for like trying to like these creative things, and trying to create a way to like sort of measure them. And outside of Free the Vaccine, I got some additional training on like artistic activism, C4A's techniques for that. And now I sometimes give like lectures and workshops on artistic activism. So it's really like not only like empowered my creative and artistic and activist practices, but also like has really influenced the way that I teach in the classroom and in school, but also like in workshops and stuff that I give. But how it's still going on, yeah, access to medicine hadn't really been super involved in that in a way, but I have been working on a project that looks at sort of the technologies and history of care in the HIV/AIDS epidemic, and connecting that to the sort of like COVID pandemic. And that'll be a performance project. It made me like sort of like end up like researching, like trying to understand some of the histories of access to medicine in that time. But before I sort of talk about that, what it also did is in this Free the Vaccine project, one of the actions that I did with people in Pittsburgh was we dressed up as Dr. Jonas Salk, who invented the polio vaccine. We put out all these like signs for people to like ask, to sort of encourage them to think about the research being done in the COVID vaccine, sort of following the trajectory of what happened in Pittsburgh, which was when the polio vaccine was discovered and Dr. Salk was asked, who owns this vaccine? He famously replied, could you patent the sun? It's a people's vaccine. Like, you can own this, it's for everyone. That's not the case with COVID-19 vaccines yet, but trying to tap into that energy. So we made a bunch of images, put these little like ghost graveyards around. It was right around Halloween to sort of like try and summon the ghost of Dr. Salk back to encourage the Vaccine Research Institute, named in his name, to sort of like do the right thing. And then so that eventually ended up like getting me and some of my collaborators in touch with those people. And they were like, that's really cool what you're doing. Let's look into that. But also, we're like really trying to deal with like issues of like trust and getting people vaccinated, and for when these vaccines get rolled out and as they were being rolled out. And then so I started like doing these, like getting involved in another group called the Community Vaccine Collaborative. And what we ended up doing was like, one of the things we ended up doing was doing a lot of like celebrations at the mass vaccination clinics, particularly the ones like for people who we were afraid were getting like left behind in receiving vaccines. So we would like go and work with like the church or the community center or like whoever was sort of organizing it, and like help them like curate what type of party would be nice for that space. We had a red carpet with a backdrop. We took Polaroid pictures to give to them to celebrate their day of getting their vaccine. we would bring food, we'd play music, we'd dance with people, as long as that was like appropriate for that space. And then not as a direct ask of any sort of like, now please tell everyone to get vaccinated, but really just to make it a really positive experience. So hopefully they would like, when those people were asked like, how was you're getting your vaccine, they'll be like, oh, it was great. We had like food and it was fun. And also for the workers who we ended up seeing at all these clinics on these weekends, to like help make it fun for them as well as they're doing all these extra shifts. So now like there's sort of like I'm working with some people at the University of Pittsburgh to do some sort of like trying to do some sort of like studies to sort of like gather qualitative data of what happened and quantitative data maybe and sort of like come up with guidelines for the future and this ongoing vaccine rollout and larger health equity rollout. It's a pilot project, so we're looking at just a few languages in the Pittsburgh community, but sort of like the experiences of different like immigrant populations and non-English native speaking populations, because that was a huge problem also, was everything was in English, and so it made it really hard for a lot of people. It generally is a problem for medical care, but especially in these like sort of like as these vaccine clinics were rolling out, like if you were already distrustful and you like on the top of that, you couldn't like read it in whatever language you prefer to get your healthcare in. So it's really like continued into this like greater sort of like health equity sort of realm that I'd never really been involved in, and now probably will, especially in sort of in light of, I try to like do my best and think about how operating in a sort of like intersectional lens and like the sort of like cross connections of things, and health is a definite like a way to sort of mark disparities around like race, gender, and class.
Wow. That's an amazing journey. I love hearing about the evolution of how this one action of getting involved in this project has grown into now you are working within this space of health equity. This is something new. It's beautiful to hear about those types of evolutions. I would like to talk more about evolution, but from another angle. You have a work, and I don't want to get the work title wrong, but it's the thing I do remember is Queer Time Machine. But that's not the full title of the work. So
yeah, My Mouth is a Queer Time Machine.
There we go. My Mouth is a Queer Time Machine. Thank you. Yes. Thinking about intersectionality, thinking about the future, thinking about what will be. One of the things that aspects of the work that jumped out to me, which was one of the first things that I saw on the site, was don't be afraid of the clocks. And when I looked it up, I found that was a quote from Felix Gonzalez Torres, I think. And I was just like, this is something to think about. And so as I watched those videos and listening and seeing what was going on, I started to think about time and the question of time, and thinking about how I put this is they're two separate ideas, like, clocks and the question of time. So are we afraid of time, or are we afraid of the actual clock? Why shouldn't I be afraid of time? Why shouldn't I be afraid of the clock? And how do I measure time? Why do I need to use this clock to measure time? Someone just told me, who came back from Senegal, Dakar, Senegal, he said that his driver said to him, "You have a schedule, but I have time." And so in his mind, time was irrelevant. Like it's not something that you look at a clock for. And so it made me think about that, the idea of being afraid of clocks. And I'm like, well, should we be afraid of clocks? I know what Torres is saying, but should we be afraid of clocks though? Because it's a regulator. And in so many different ways, it's regulated our lives. Like if you're over 35, for example, as a woman, They tell you that you will have a geriatric pregnancy. If you are 21, now you can drink, but you could actually go to ward 18. All of these time schedules. And so it made me think about that, just looking at the new media work and listening to the thoughts. So I wanted to bring that up and point that out. And I wanted to ask you, just your thoughts on that, clocks and time and these ideas.
Yeah, maybe could you actually, Joseph, give a little description of the project itself and the technology behind it too, before going deep into the themes?
Yes, and thank you. That's like that is like the highest compliment that's what the work made you think about. That's like, that's great. And so yes, for all of the listeners out there, there'll be a link, I'm sure, so you can go view it yourself. But also, what it is, to describe it, is it was like in this particular iteration, it was about 20 1-minute performances with people in the School of Drama in Carnegie Mellon, where I went to grad school in the theater department. So kind of a very specific group, but like people who are like, brand new to the school, faculty, all staff, all sorts of everyone who was there. And then so we had people work with a sort of like queer trans person from history, and then sort of like when we would help people choose a person if they didn't have someone they immediately wanted to talk about. And then over an hour, me and my co-creators, Jean-Luc DeLadurantaye and Lyam Gabel, would work with them to create a sort of live 1-minute video performance that sort of takes imagery that they were interested about this like queer icon, historical figure, and then layer a video and an action together in real time, sort of so I was actually using this process of that I use for live projection mapping, but over the internet and with live layering, and so people could see what I was doing in real time, and we could all sort of respond and talk through things and layer things, and then we would create this piece sort of together. I sort of and it would start by getting to know the person, and sort of and it was so I was working with queer and trans people and talk about why they're interested in sort of creating engaging with this sort of this particular historical figure, and then we would sort of ask them what they want to do and work together to figure out what the performance would be. And then and there's sort of these drippy sort of collagey performances that are meant to sort of aesthetically connect this sort of queer time, whatever, hopefully something in the queer time machine realm of aesthetics, which can be anything, but in this one moment. And then we made a giant website, and by giant website, I mean digitally very big.
Yeah.
So, literally, so you, and then made these constellations that sort of connected all these videos all over. And then so you the way to navigate it is you have to go through, you have to physically scroll through this website up in all directions to find the pieces and dig them up. And so time, yeah, I don't know. Clocks, being afraid of...
What's the answer?
I wish and that there were answers. I don't really think that there are. So, but sometimes I really, really wish some. But yeah, no, I mean time, time's regulation by clocks is I don't know. It's like a power structure. It's a way that keeps everything sort of in line, and in sort of this obsession with linear time in general, and these it holds up a lot of really not true and messed up myths, that things get better over time in a linear way, as in always a little bit better. Not true. And that that's and that one should be moving towards that sort of cultural belief in as most optimized for your time way as possible, and that's something I for sure struggle with, but anyways, I don't think it's real, and I think it's kind of toxic structure that results in burnout and people being it makes sense to take advantage of all these people to extract some amount of value in a monetary form, or in an identity or labor form. So what's nice about queer time is like thinking about opening up all these portals of experience all at the same time and trying to embody that in this way you experienced this particular work. You know, it's like 21-minute segments from 1 hour conversations put in a nest that doesn't have to be viewed in any particular way, you know, just because it's like, and like, because it's nice. It's like, it's a breath of air for how you normally have to experience things. And like, you know, it sort of reflects all the holes that exist in queer history and sort of like the holes, but also all the like beautiful little things that you can uncover in the sand that are just lying there that you didn't know, you know, like, and sort of like how like time can be like renegotiated to be sort of like multiple connection points that sort of like stretch and fold in there and how they feel and how they're being played out in your life, and there's not an order necessarily or a hierarchy. And if you can like view, if you can experience time like that and are like, you know, lucky and privileged enough to like be able to like spend any amount of time not thinking out sort of like hegemonic linear demands of your labor, then like, you know, if you can do that for a second or hope for that for a second, that's like a really powerful thing that's worth trying to figure out.
Yeah, for me, you know, I actually did the traditional scroll up and down. And then Danny was like, did you go back and forth and up and down? And I was like, I went up and down, but I didn't go back and forth, like from side to side, left to right.
Mm-hmm.
Then I scrolled left to right. I was like, oh, okay, cool. And then, you know, just seeing more of the videos. And I'm gonna go back to it as well and just check out more of it. But I was, you know, it was just really, like you said, it's almost like a breath of fresh air as far as just that first introduction into that. You know, I was just like, oh man, oh God, time and clocks, like, ooh, that's on my mind a lot these days.
Yeah.
So thank you for, you know, you all creating that space for us to go into and be able to be there. I wish I did have a big ass computer, like 5 screens, so I could just have it all once and just.
I wanted to see it up on a wall, like projected on a wall or something where I could like somehow interact with it, right?
Like almost like you
the future.
Yeah. So my dream is to one day do a version of this project that is a bunch of potentially interactive screens in a big space, you know, and like maybe build a like sort of like growing archive, you know, like maybe go to spaces and like collect a bunch more moments and then like build them into this thing and then like set it up to display from all the previous collected moments and places and carry it forward, bring it around.
That would be,
so like, this project has a future. Yeah,
it'll have a future.
Oh, it has a future. It's the stars, you know?
Yeah.
Speaking of time, I want to be respectful of time, but I do think before we do our final question, it would be nice to ask at least one more question. Joseph, can you stay a few extra minutes? Is that okay?
Yeah, that works for me.
Okay, great. I was just wondering, with this project, did you have an activist agenda to it? Like, was there something you wanted the people who experienced it not just to feel or think, but to do? And then I'm also wondering, in the realm of LGBTQIA+, if there's other activism that you're currently working on. Are there other future projects that we should look out for?
Yeah, with this particular project, not necessarily in the sort of like planned artistic activist outcome that I do with some projects of like, I want X, I'm hoping for these set of objectives to lead towards this goal. But like, you know, a general goal, I think, you know, anything that sort of like connects people to histories that they didn't know about, myself included, you know, especially, and it's like there's this project made with these people, like I'm imagining this project made with like groups of people and figuring out how to do that for ones that I don't, like groups of people in specific places, right? So this was like at a school, and so like I think like taking a bunch of students and having their experience like learning about some of their queer ancestors, that type of education, like I think is sort of connected to a type of activism that I'm interested in, even if it's not directed to a sort of certain like policy outcome. And in a related project that is this other project called The Dance Floor, the Hospital Room, and the Kitchen Table. That's a project that I'm working on. It's in active development right now. And it's like a performance and immersive media project that's also going to hopefully have an interactive archive that weaves together stories, technologies, and interviews about queer care from COVID-19 through the HIV/AIDS crisis. So that involves a lot of like intergenerational interviews with people who are involved in the early days of the HIV/AIDS crisis to this all the way up through it's sort of like its ongoing current situation today, which is, a lot less urban, a lot less quiet. But anyway, so there's all these interviews, and a lot of these interviews are then like lip synced and and like in real space, hopefully again very soon. But yeah, so this project like takes these interviews and reperforms them through oral history lip syncing into a space to sort of create a bridge from the people experiencing it in the past, and also like looks at how these people from the past who were alive and were interviewing are also like existing today, and sort of what they think about the COVID pandemic and any connections or not. And so I just went and did a bunch of interviews in California, looked at a bunch of the queer archives that exist out there. I've also done a bunch of interviews in Pittsburgh. I'm going to go back to New Orleans, do some interviews in the fall, and then workshop this and do some more interviews in New York in December. And so it's actually like not only looking at, so it's this project that's looking at the HIV/AIDS crisis from people who are often left out of the stories, which is, and also like some of the places like Pittsburgh and New Orleans, while also looking at New York and San Francisco. And so that'll have a performance that'll premiere at Chatham University in March of 2022, and also the Contemporary Art Center in New Orleans in May of 2022. And then with all of this, there'll be another exhibition sort of right around March at the Kelly Strayhorn Theater. And then also I'm trying to create a browser-based virtual reality archive of some of these interviews so people can sort of, once again, archives. I love archives. Have spent many hours in them, could spend forever in them. But I want to try and make a digital version of these so people, if they see the performance or don't get a chance to, can go further from seeing this performance and like listen to a full-length interview or something, or a longer portion of it. Or like, see some of I'm doing some 3D captures of the spaces that people talk about in these interviews, and like put that in a browser, in like someone's web browser, so they can sort of see the space while they're hearing it. So like creating places that sort of like use performance as a means of like connecting, expanding on queer histories, but also like trying to figure out how to sort of like have these artistic projects move, like also preserve themselves and create moments for engagement for the future. So I think that's also connected to the type of activism I'm interested in, especially as a teacher. It's like a lot of education. Like I feel like my education about all this stuff when I was growing up was not very good. Like they were just like the HIV/AIDS crisis. It's a thing that happened, not that it's like ongoing and like not really what happened. And so like anything that sort of like creates like knowledge bridges from the past to the future, I think, particularly for histories that are less visible, is a type of activism that I'm interested in.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing the work, hopefully at some point in person. So thank you for elaborating on that, because I was curious about that work as well. I love the title. The dance floor, the hospital room, and the kitchen table, as well as My Mouth is a Queer Time Machine.
Yeah.
And those titles are made by my like collaborator, Lyam B.
I feel like there's so much we could still talk about, but that always happens, and we still have to end.
Always happens.
Yeah.
Here we go with time and the clocks.
Yeah.
Right. Time. Right. But we're all artivists, and we're all educators. We all have things to do, important things to do. So should we jump into our final question for today?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm ready. Are you going to do the countdown?
Yes. And we'll do it on 1. So 3.
On 1. Okay.
On one. So
we have this conversation every time. We're like, is it on 0 or is it on 1? It's on 3.
All right.
Okay.
So 3, 2, 1.
All right. So, Joseph, for our final question for today, here we go. In your utopia, there would be
That's a hard question.
I know. And it's a funny question too, because it's something we talk about at C4AA a lot, is this idea of utopia. So in your utopia, that means you should have an answer, by the way. But it is a hard question. In your utopia, there would be
an infinite ways of experiencing and understanding time, that we're not in a hierarchical arrangement to each other and somehow moved freely all with each other. And it just made experiencing time so pleasant and multifaceted and in ways without judgment and full of hope.
I love that. Great.
See, it wasn't hard.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't too hard. I think it's funny. I feel like every person we've interviewed so far, pretty much the first answer had something to do with marijuana, and then after like politics. But I like this. Like that was a totally different answer than we've ever gotten before. I love that.
I love these backgrounds. So come out and get one of these. You know.
Well, this is what makes Jan and I a little special, because you're our special guest today. Jan and I need something special and sparkly. Well, Joseph, thank you so much for coming today. It has been an absolute pleasure. It's always a pleasure to see you and talk to you. We will definitely keep up with your work. Please feel free to let us know with any of your current projects, any new exciting updates. And then is there any final maybe tips or suggestions or gems we'd like to say? Any final gems you would like to share with our spectators today?
I guess my last little final gem is just like always keep making stuff in whatever way you do that, you know, in whatever scale or means you can do it at. Just keep doing that.
Yes. And
Yes,
also,
and
we need to know how folks can actually locate you anywhere and everywhere.
if they're smart, they already probably looked down in the comment section and saw all of the links to your wonderful work. But yes, please, Joseph, tell us.
Yeah, I mean, you can go to my website, I guess, www.jamodei.com. Hard to spell, Jamodei. That's Joseph Amodei, where that comes from. Yeah, and you can message me from there. You can get links to all sorts of things. I play with you can just Google my name. I'm sure I've set that up to make that work pretty well. Yeah, you know, you can find me through Chatham's website if you want to see my immersive media work. You know, and a lot of these projects have their own websites. Packing Cracking. You can look up Free the Vaccine, of course. You can look up Packing and Cracking. You can look up the dance floor, the hospital room, the kitchen room, and most of those will take most of the time Google search and or a Google search with my name will take you right there.
Perfect.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
This was good. I learned a lot, actually.
Yeah. And it always leads to new questions, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you again for being with us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in, y'all. Don't forget to find us on social media and to subscribe to our YouTube channel, because that's how we know that you love us. No, but seriously, subscribe so you'll always know when to reflect, recalibrate. Oh, also, don't forget to check out the notes to this podcast episode for links to all the resources we reference in this interview, as well as the music and sound effects we feature. We even include details about the fab apparel we're decking out. Don't be shy to hit us up with questions.